folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick here for this episode of Friday Morning GM with co-host Vasilis Larikos. I will try and get that right?
You got it. That was good. You nailed it, Ken.
I appreciate doing this show with you, Josh, as well as all the other content we produced over the years. A great back and forth and some understanding of how we view general manager topics a little bit differently, and I think you'll hear some of that today. But the Ravens coming out of this first week have a lot of injuries to deal with, and we're going to talk about that mostly today.
Yeah, it's tough, especially when you're looking at it from a general manager or salary cap perspective. You have a player like Marcus Williams, who you pay a big chunk of money to. Not only do you have to find a replacement that also potentially eats into your salary cap for this year, there are long-term effects for future salary caps as well. Not to mention not having some of your best players available on the field for a pivotal Week 2 game.
Yeah, absolutely. I can never recall a worse game in terms of, I can't recall another game where the Ravens lost 4 starters in the same game. I can't do it. I know they had a real bad game at Tennessee a few years back, but this was awful. The game against Dallas in Week 4, I think it was, of 2012, where they lost Webb and Lewis.
And Lewis, yeah, that was a tough one. I was at that one. Yeah, very tough.
Yeah, but this was the worst of the worst, and fortunately, but these guys don't all seem to be gone for the year. It might be 2 out of 4. I guess we're still kind of hoping it's 1 out of 4, and that Williams makes it back at some point. I'm actually a little bit skeptical that's going to happen, but the Ravens gone out and done some addressing of these things already.
Yeah, so the big acquisition, I guess if you want to call it that, was Duron Harmon, a safety, a longtime New England Patriot, has started 49 games the last 3 years as a journeyman for Detroit, Atlanta, and the Raiders. So he is now a member of the Ravens practice squad, hopefully supplying some depth as that 4th safety.
Yeah, he's frankly, I have a hard time really believing he's available still. He is almost 33 years old. He'll be 33 in January, but he's played, he played 7 years at New England before he moved on, and he was still a very good player last year for the Raiders. Did a lot of things well. Rushes the quarterback occasionally, but mostly the guy's a free safety. And it's always great when you can go to the market and pick up a free safety, so you're not restricting the responsibilities you might have. But Harmon, very comfortable playing on the back end. And the thing that really stands out among his statistics is that he's allowed 12 touchdowns and 27 interceptions career on his targets per PFF. Now, I will couch that slightly by saying PFF often gives a target to an underneath player on a reception between level 2 and 3. So that doesn't necessarily completely capture that. Safeties tend to do pretty well in PFF's grading system because of that. But it is something that I think Harmon has been exceptional for relative to other safeties over the years.
Yes, very steady player. It's interesting how sometimes these safeties linger on the market longer than you would imagine for players with starting caliber pedigree and good play on the field. 12.2 yards per target last year, which is not a great mark. That may be why he's wasn't quite as coveted as we would have assumed this offseason.
12.2 yards per target.
That's per on Pro Football Reference. I saw that one.
I don't get that. I mean, it's bad, but it's under 9 yards per target on PFF. At 221 divided by 25 is what I have here. Interesting, because that really makes a big difference if the 12 was legitimate. Career, he's allowed, 1,369 yards on 152 targets. Safeties tend to be a little bit higher because the throws that are charged to them tend to be deeper on the field. But that's not, it's not a great number. It's over 8 yards per target career, but his overall grading and touchdowns allowed interception ratio is exceptional. So I'm actually very excited about that acquisition in terms of what it brings to Ravens. Very sure tackler as well, and a guy who I think fits the Ravens pretty well. Don't think he necessarily immediately displaces Daryl Worley. Where are you on that?
Right, that's where I was too. I think Worley probably is the better option at this point. But technically, you need four safeties on the roster, and Ardarius Washington and Brandon Stevens are certainly needed at cornerback at this point,
Mm-hmm.
especially because there's likely no opportunity for Kyle Hamilton to come down into a nickel role occasionally. So you need a fourth safety, and he's probably the best one that was available at this point.
Yeah, I would agree entirely with all of that. And one of the nice things coming out of week one was that Stevens and Washington held the fort pretty well. Particularly Washington, I think he really played extremely well. But Stevens as well. I mean, better than the Ravens could have hoped on the outside. And I think that they've got a good chance to make do with him. The outside corners I thought were playing a little soft in the game, but I'm very happy with the way Stevens and Darby both came downhill and made the plays they really needed to make.
Sure, absolutely. Not much to critique on defense at all during the first game.
So at running back, the Ravens appear to be standing pat for the moment. And I did not think that was a fixed thing, regardless of what Harbaugh says, because Harbaugh's talking about going to Melvin Gordon and being happy with the guys they got, blah, 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 blah. I thought they might go out and get an R or one cast off that's sitting on somebody else's roster. Because if you're going to do it, this time of year is where there might really be quality sitting on somebody else's practice squad.
Sure, before they are activated to the regular roster and are not available. I would anticipate Melvin Gordon will probably be promoted for week 2 as a P-squad elevation. And they still have Owen Wright on the practice squad as well, who showed a few flashes when the blocking allowed him to get past the line of scrimmage in the preseason. I don't think you necessarily need to go out and actively look for a running back, because as history tells us, there will be running backs available later in the season if you really need somebody. And Keaton Mitchell should be back week 5.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I do think part of their plan is just to wait on Mitchell. Mitchell really looks like now he's going to be featured in this offense, not just in a small way, 2 carries a game kind of thing. But I think he should get some real playing time. He should be have a significant role in a variety of packages. And actually, I kind of hope they use him as more than just a tailback in this offense. That there might be some options for him in Pony and in other places where he's flexed out with another running back in the game.
Sure. I think that could definitely work. He has that wiggle. One potential domino effect of J.K. Dobbins' unfortunate injury is how that affect Justice Hill, and will the Ravens be less willing to use him on special teams because he may be the lead back going forward. So then you're maybe looking with Kevon Seymour and Tylan Wallace serving as your gunners instead of Hill.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I really hadn't thought about that. But this probably does mean a reduced role for Hill on special teams. I would bet. It is always a lot of dominoes. Whether you're thinking about deactivating Tylan Wallace, you understand. Where are we going to get the special teams player to fill in for him? But it's you need to have a backup at that gunner spot, and hopefully the Ravens have it figured out, or they can continue to go with Hill on just a couple plays a game that it would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting for Eric DeCosta earlier this season, just figuring out these numbers.
Now, before this season started, okay, and on cutdown day, the Ravens had a very difficult decision to make on the offensive line, because the offensive line had been tremendously healthy all camp. It had been one of the great stories. It had been one of the things that I was continually harping on, was just how nice it was to have a completely healthy offensive line. And the entire offensive line had been bubble wrapped, didn't play a single play of preseason. And that included McCary, the 6th offensive lineman. I mean, how often do you hear that guy getting bubble wrapped? and they're all ready to go on opening day, and everybody's out there as starting as expected. John Simpson wins the left guard battle in a landslide. Was a runaway. Looked like he could really contribute at a high level this year. Didn't have a bad first game, by the way. John Simpson, I thought, was played fine, but now with the 2 injuries, the Ravens have a different question. They have do they need another offensive lineman question, because as it stands on Sunday, it looks like one of their developmental guys may have to be activated.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a line from left to right: McCary, Simpson, Mustipher, Zeitler, and Moses. And then you have Faalele and Cleveland as your primary backups. And then Salah is your 8th lineman. Who you have on the practice squad at this point are two developmental guards, Tayshaun Manning and Tykeem Doss, who are probably not ready for prime time. Unfortunately, David Sharp, probably the 11th offensive lineman out of preseason, was latched on with the Panthers and has been promoted to their active roster, so they cannot circle back to him at this point.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a great option at this point, honestly, to go with Sharp. I think I'd prefer to go with McCary, and that's really saying something because McCary at left tackle is not an ideal option by any means. But the Ravens are now kind of out of backups at left tackle. I don't even know who's next up there. It could be Saleh, but really thinking about who it might be, what we saw as a pass blocker from Saleh in the preseason was a guy who was not ready for prime time. So I guess going into this week, I think Cleveland almost at three positions is probably their primary. And I don't even know what happens. I don't even know who takes over at center, whether it's Zeitler or who it might be if you have a problem there.
Or Pat Ricard, maybe. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough situation. The Ravens have had this issue of not necessarily having quality depth at offensive tackle. It's one of the hardest places to find it, especially hard for a best player available drafting team to find it because sometimes that's a position that other teams will reach up on around two.
As a bettor, you demand perfection, and MyBookie delivers. NFL, college football, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. If the first two legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and use those funds for another bet or let it all ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join the MyBookie family for an entire season filled with odds boosts, free bets, and super contests. This season, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet your deposit amount once, and you're ready to cash out at any time. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash deposit bonus. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. Film Study is brought to you by GoPuff. GoPuff is a delivery app that offers super fast delivery of anything you need. Their simple-to-use app lets you order your favorite brands and products right to your door in 30 minutes or less. No middleman, no crazy fees, and no waiting around. GoPuff has literally everything you could ever want. Get snacks, drinks, groceries, alcohol, home essentials, and more delivered with a click of a button. For a limited time only, GoPuff is giving new customers $10 off their first 10 orders, plus a free 14-day trial of their exclusive membership program by using the code WELCOME1010. GoPuff's membership program gets you access to unlimited free deliveries with no service fees, extremely low pricing on over 150 everyday essentials like eggs, milk, Ben & Jerry's, and more, and insane weekly deals on the most coveted and in-demand brands and products. So download the GoPuff app or visit GoPuff.com and use the code WELCOME1010 today.
Early because they know how scarce offensive tackles are.
Right. Yeah. That's so anyway, I would assume that DaCosta would be out there looking at available linemen, and that is a place for rapid degradation of the replacement level. We talk about this sometimes on the show, but it bears repeating once a season or more, is that the guy you can pick up off somebody else's practice squad in mid-September is a hell of a lot better than the guy you can pick up for that same position in mid-December. And it's more rapid at certain positions. And you mentioned running back, you typically have a shallower drop-off in that level of play to the guy you can find in December. I agree with that. I think if you're talking left tackle, there's just nothing left. Sometimes if you're talking cornerback, where a lot of injuries accrue, there's nothing left in December. You really are down to guys who might not have even been on a practice squad to start the season a lot of times. So
offensive tackle, I would opine is the most scarce skill set among the NFL. Now you look at Cleveland; they lost their right tackle Conklin for a duo knee injury, but they had selected DeJuan Jones, I believe, in the third round, who was a player who was a rookie, but he has the size and shape and potential to be a decent fill-in. moving forward, I mean, I think you really have to invest more resources into that just because of the scarcity.
Yeah. Obviously, the Browns having a huge all-in year and losing a player at a key position like that is the kind of medicine that is very difficult to swallow for an organization like that that's trying to win all at once right now. Let's continue with the tackle situation for a little bit, because Ronnie Stanley's injury, it has multi-year implications. It doesn't just have one, because the Ravens, I think to start with, Ronnie was pretty much the results of this year were going to determine whether or not the Ravens are going to have him in 24. Now I think it's even more important he get back on the field before the year's over to maintain his spot on the roster and not be cut. The Ravens have about an $8.3 million benefit from cutting him. You know, they can in fact push additional value from that into 2025, push another, I think it's about $9 million more of that cap into 25, which means that they can cut a lot of cap for cutting Ronnie Stanley. But the problem is a huge investment in finding their new left tackle.
Yes, it's a shame. Out of Ronnie's first 70 games, he missed 8. That was before he signed his contract. I believe one of those 8 was actually just a rest in the late season in 2019. Since then, he's missed 31 of 49. And if he can't anchor, which he was having problems anchoring before this ankle injury, it just seems like a matter of time until he's rolled up one again. And I hate to say it, but he just does not seem like a reliable option at this point. So $15 million, if you use a post-June deferral next off season, I think that really has to become an option. Took a quick look at the unrestricted free agents. Longtime Cowboy Tyron Smith is a UFA, and he's actually playing for a pretty cheap number this year because he has also dealt with injuries. I think pretty much any of the stopgaps you're going to be looking at for a decent number are going to be these Dwayne Brown, late 30s guys who are just unreliable at this point.
Mm-hmm. And yet that might be a better option than not having anybody or having to go to Saleh or to Ben Cleveland on the left side, or move Moses to the left and have Ben Cleveland on the right. I mean, you can come up with a lot of pretty bad combinations out of what you might have to do. I actually was pretty positive in Ben Cleveland's rookie year that might be a place he would end up because he's got reasonable length. I think he's 33 3/4 or something. So he's not extremely short, that he might end up at right tackle because of his massive size and a lot of the things he can do. And the Ravens have waited till this year to even try him at tackle. They did try, it wasn't Cleveland, was it? No, it was Powers. They tried at center a couple of years ago for one day in camp, and that didn't work out in terms of some wild stats.
I mean, the other option is McCary. McCary's still under contract next year at, 6.4? And now they could get saved 4.4 if they released him. So you release McCary and you release Stanley, and then you have, with a post-June, then you have almost $20 million to find a new left tackle. But the list of needs in next offseason is only growing larger.
Yeah, I mean, you have an enormous glut of UFAs. People like Dobbins and Queen and Zeitler all wanted contracts now because they're in the last year of their deals. But it just there's no money. I mean, there's no long-term money for the Ravens to do this, and they have a little bit better cap situation this year because Lamar's actually signed, and has the lower first-year number. It gets a lot worse, and it gets pretty bad pretty quickly for Lamar. So, unfortunately, this is something the Ravens are just going to have to deal with on a case-by-case basis. I thought the Voorhees draft pick in particular was one that was directly aimed at saving money at right guard, because he seems like the perfect fit there next year.
Agreed. But when you look at it, they're essentially at 10 starters, current starters that are in line to become unrestricted. And they had the 11th least cap space in the league projected at this point. Mm-hmm. As far as draft picks, they have in line to get a 4th round for Powers, a 4th round compensatory. They also have an additional 7th rounder for trading Chuck Clark, but they sacrificed their 6th rounder next year for Voorhees.
Aguilar.
Right, because he knocked out Josh Oliver. But you're looking at, you need 2 receivers, 1 to 2 corners, probably 2 defensive linemen, an edge, a running back, maybe a guard. I mean, that's 8 picks. You can't. You almost know exactly where your 8 needs are already heading into week 2 the year before.
They are literally going to have to pull a rabbit out of a hat in terms of finding some UDFA defensive linemen, or have a development that's unexpected this year. I don't know who that might be, but maybe it's Brandon Stevens at cornerback, and now you're really you're praying right now if you're hoping for that. Brandon Stevens also will be a 4th-year player next year, right? He's in his 3rd season, so he'll be a free agent after the year. And it's the best time for him to break out is in year 4. Don't get me wrong, but it's still it's not a it's not a multi-year solution. It's just be a 1-year solution if it works out.
So I mean, I think you're kind of with Mitchell and Hill, you're kind of laying the groundwork at running back, and then if Malik Ham should give you some of what Clowney does, but you're pinching pennies already. Well, one other point I wanted to make, I think it's possible that some of these players that are on IR are not brought back, because I took a quick look at it. They amended the CBA last offseason, 2022 offseason. So it's 8 total reactivations, but that includes the NFI list. So Bowser will take one of those. So if you bring back Pepe and Bowser and Mitchell and Ham, you're already halfway to your 8. That's 4 out of 8. A guy like Pepe, we don't want to develop him, obviously, but when you have Ardarius playing well and Mollett playing well, or at least on the team, maybe you just leave him on IR and save that.
Okay, so I don't know how many the Ravens have used in past years, but it's not a large number that they use of the non-starting the season on IR guys. So they have some that they're planning to come back, and they put them on IR, and they can make best use of the spot, create extra roster space, yada, yada, essentially create 4th game, 5th game replacements. It used to be 4th game replacements out of those extra spots. So those guys are much more likely to come back. The guys who get injured during the season, very unlikely to come back once they go on IR. But it is interesting to me that the Ravens haven't made IR moves on either of their linemen yet. Ronnie Stanley did not get moved to IR yet, or Linderbaum.
The rumor is that Ronnie may be available before Linderbaum. Linderbaum might be a month. Ronnie might be 2-3 weeks. The other one to me that's really surprising is Marcus, because he was put on IR last year and then did return. It's just, you don't want to be in a position where you already have 4 of the 8 earmarked and you're not even halfway through September yet.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll reiterate that I'm just a little bit less concerned about that. I think the 8 is still extremely ample, and I think the rule change was actually directed at the Ravens to both make it, after 4 weeks and to limit the number, because the Ravens are one of the teams that are just magicians in terms of working that number. I could see that number getting reduced, by the way, in the future. But the 8 number, I still see that as being more than enough as it stands right now. And if they have a couple more 4-week injuries during the season, then that's going to change rapidly. Also, once you get to about week 10 and you start having injuries, you don't put people on IR anymore. You got so many walking wounded, you just carry them on the roster and you deal with it. But there's a relatively limited window of time where people will still be injured, and then you still hope they can come back at some point during the season.
Sure, certainly agree. Just wanted to make that point as the reason why maybe some of these players have not been put on IR that were injured week 1.
All right. Outstanding. Vas, always a pleasure to do this show with you. Tell folks where they can talk football.
My pleasure, Ken. I am the co-managing editor at Baltimore Beatdown Blog. You can reach me on Twitter at Vasilis Beatdown, Vasilis Beatdown. And I have a podcast that I do with Yuri every Thursday night called The Ravens Way.
All right, outstanding. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up on Twitter with DM. They're always open. I want to hear from you and what you want to talk about with regard to the Baltimore Ravens. Whatever you're passionate about, can be any topic at all, really. Hit me up and we'll decide if there's a good show in there. I'll get right back to you. For Vasilis Larikos, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next time on Friday Morning GM.